It's been years now, and the smell of dust and stagnant air still clings to the back of my throat sometimes, a phantom sensation. I still wake up in a cold sweat, convinced I can hear the distant rumble of a shopping cart over polished tiles. They say time heals all wounds, but some scars just never fade, especially when they're etched onto your soul by something you can't explain, can't rationalize. It started with a job posting. Overnight security, abandoned commercial property. The pay was phenomenal, almost suspicious. $250 a night, cash. No questions asked. My bank account was looking pretty anemic at the time, and a few weeks of this would set me straight. I showed up at the address given, the old Northwood Mall. Northwood had been a local landmark, bustling with life back in the 90s, but it had fallen into disrepair, losing tenants to the newer, flashier megaplex across town. It had finally shut its doors 5 years prior, an abrupt, almost ghostly closure. Now, it was slated for demolition, and they needed someone to keep an eye on it until the wrecking balls started swinging. Prevent squatters, vandals, that sort of thing. Sounded easy enough. My first night, the air was thick with the scent of damp concrete and something else, something vaguely metallic, like old pennies. The security office was a small glorified broom closet near the main entrance, equipped with a monitor hooked to a few static-ridden cameras and a crackling two-way radio. Just walk the perimeter every hour, check the doors, make sure nothing's amiss, the supervisor had grunted, handing me a heavy ring of keys and a dim flashlight. You'll be alone, nobody else here. Being alone was the point, right? I started my first patrol, the beam of my cheap flashlight cutting through the oppressive gloom. The mall was vast, an echoing tomb. Dead escalators stood frozen, their teeth gleaming dully. Mannequins, draped in white sheets like spectral figures, stood silently in shop windows. The food court was a wasteland of overturned chairs and plastic tables. Every step I took resonated, bouncing off the high ceilings, making the silence that followed feel heavier, more profound. It was boring mostly. Hours of trudging, the only sound the squeak of my worn boots, and the low hum of the emergency lights that cast long, distorted shadows. I tried to pass the time by inventing stories for the mannequins, or imagining the lives of the people who once filled these halls. But there was always a low thrum beneath the silence, a feeling of expectation, like the building was holding its breath. The first noticeable anomaly was subtle, almost imperplexable. On my second night, I swore a shop door, the entrance to an old electronics store, was ajar. I distinctly remembered closing it on my previous rounds. Cold spots seemed to cling to certain aisles, biting at my exposed skin despite the relative warmth inside. I dismissed it as the building settling, or my own overactive imagination born of solitude. But the unease, once a whisper, started to hum. Then came the sounds. Faint at first. A rustle from the clothing section of a department store. A distant thud, like something heavy falling, from the level above me. I'd pause, flashlight beam sweeping frantically, but nothing. Just the silence rushing in, immediate and complete. The air started to feel thicker, heavy with an unseen presence. My rationalizations wore thin. It wasn't the building settling. It sounded like movement. By the third night, the unsettling discoveries began. In Fashion House, a dress shop where mannequins still stood frozen in impossibly elegant poses, I found a single red high heel on the floor, perfectly centered in the main aisle. It wasn't there before. I knew it. I'd walked this mall a dozen times already. I picked it up, expecting it to be dusty, but it felt clean. Too clean. Like it had just been placed there. Shaking my head, I put it back on the display stand. A vagrant, I told myself, somehow slipping past. But the doors were locked, the windows intact. Later that same night, in the toy store, Imagination Station, a child's red ball, one of those cheap bouncy ones, sat in the middle of a display of broken doll parts. It seemed to pulse with an unnatural vibrancy against the faded decor. Had it rolled from a shelf? But the shelves were uniformly bare, many collapsing. I nudged it with my foot. It rolled a short distance, then stopped. It felt like it was watching me. Sleep became a fractured thing, riddled with dreams of endless identical corridors and the sound of distant, echoing footsteps. I started bringing a thermos of strong coffee, anything to keep the creeping exhaustion at bay. My supervisor, a gruff man named Al, just scoffed when I mentioned the odd occurrences. "Malls are creepy at night, kid. All those empty spaces. Just the wind." But it wasn't the wind. On my fifth night, the sounds were clearer, undeniable. A rhythmic clatter, far off, like someone pushing a shopping cart over tiled floors. Scrape, clack, scrap, clack. My heart clawed at my ribs. I froze, listening. It started in the food court, moved down the main concourse, then seemed to stop, somewhere near the women's clothing section. Terror, cold and sharp, pierced through my carefully constructed composure. It wasn't just sounds anymore. There were lights, faint, flickering glows deep within a locked beauty supply store. I saw it on the monitor. A subtle, almost imperceptible pulse of light. Not a security light, but something else, like a phone screen or a small lamp. When I reached the store, the interior was dark, silent, untouched. This was when the shopping became undeniable. Nearly every morning, I'd find new items. A single lipstick tube on a jewelry counter. A pair of faded jeans draped over a display rack in a long-dead boutique. A dusty, half-empty bottle of cheap perfume uncapped on a counter in a pharmacy. These weren't things vandals would move. They were too specific, too deliberately placed. It was as if someone, or something, was carefully selecting and arranging them. The mannequins. My God, the mannequins. I started noticing them turn slightly, their eyeless faces angled towards the main walkways. One morning, I found a child-sized mannequin in the food court, seated at a grimy table, a plastic plate and cup in front of it. It had been sitting in the window of a long-closed children's clothing store, tucked away in a corner of the mall. How did it get there? Who moved it? And why? My flashlight beam trembled in my hand. The air grew heavy with a metallic, ozone-like scent, like an old TV humming too loud. The chill deepened. I started checking my own reflection in the darkened store windows, half expecting to see something behind me. Every shadow seemed to coalesce. Every distant creak sounded like a footstep. I started carrying a heavy wrench in my hand, a pathetic attempt at self-defense against an unseen horror. One night, around 3 a.m., the sound of the shopping cart returned. Closer now, emanating from the main atrium. Scrape-clack, scrape-clack. It was slow, deliberate, heavy. My breath hitched in my throat. I could hear other sounds now, too. A faint rustling, almost like cloth dragging, and a low, guttural murmur. It sounded like someone talking to themselves, a hushed, ragged whisper I couldn't quite decipher. Panic seizing me, I clutched my wrench and shone my light down the concourse leading to the atrium. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Nothing. Just the endless rows of darkened shop fronts. But the sounds were still there, distinct, coming from the center of the atrium. I had to see. I had to. I moved, stealthily, my heart hammering against my ribs, each beat echoing in my ears louder than the approaching sounds. As I neared the concourse, the whispering stopped. The shopping cart sound died. An unnatural silence descended, deeper and more terrifying than before. It was waiting for me. I knew it. Peering around the corner, I shone my light into the atrium. It was vast, 2 stories high, bathed in the faint, sickly glow of emergency lights. And there, in the very center, was a shopping cart. An old, rusted metal one, the kind with one wonky wheel that makes that distinctive clack sound. But it wasn't empty. Piled high in the cart were items, not random debris, but a collection. A child's worn teddy bear, one eye missing. A framed photograph, its glass shattered, depicting a smiling family at a beach. A woman's silk scarf, the color vibrant against the dust. A single tarnished silver earring. A men's watch, its face cracked. It was a bizarre, heartbreaking collection of personal effects. And then I saw it. Next to the cart, arranged carefully on the dusty floor, was a small, almost childlike display. A broken porcelain doll, its head cracked, sat propped against a stack of old magazines. Beside it, a tiny scuffed leather shoe. And nestled right in front of the doll, reflecting my flashlight's beam, was a silver locket. I moved, stealthily, my heart hammering against my ribs, each beat echoing in my ears louder than the approaching sounds. As I neared the concourse, the whispering stopped. The shopping cart sound died. An unnatural silence descended, deeper and more terrifying than before. It was waiting for me. I knew it. Peering around the corner, I shone my light into the atrium. It was vast, 2 stories high, bathed in the faint, sickly glow of emergency lights. And there, in the very center, was a shopping cart. An old rusted metal one, the kind with one wonky wheel that makes that distinctive clack sound. But it wasn't empty. Piled high in the cart were items. Not random debris, but a collection. A child's worn teddy bear, one eye missing. A framed photograph, its glass shattered, depicting a smiling family at a beach. A woman's silk scarf, the color vibrant against the dust. A single tarnished silver earring. A men's watch, its face cracked. It was a bizarre, heartbreaking collection of personal effects. And then I saw it. Next to the cart, arranged carefully on the dusty floor, was a small, almost childlike display. A broken porcelain doll, its head cracked, sat propped against a stack of old magazines. Beside it, a tiny, scuffed leather shoe. And nestled right in front of the doll, reflecting my flashlight's beam, was a silver locket. My blood ran cold. I knew that locket. The intricate scrollwork around the edges. The small, almost imperceptible scratch on the clasp. My hands started to shake uncontrollably. I knew it because it had belonged to my little sister, Lily, the one who disappeared years ago during the Northwood Mall collapse, the incident that had prematurely shut down the mall, the incident they'd called an unexplained structural failure, where several bodies, including Lily's, were never recovered. The official story was that she was among the missing, presumed dead, lost in the rubble. But here it was. Her locket. My flashlight beam trembled, illuminating the open locket. Inside, barely visible, were 2 faded photos. One of me, a goofy kid with missing front teeth, and one of Lily, her wide, trusting eyes looking out at the world. A cold breath, smelling of fresh grave dirt, and something else, something cloyingly sweet like stale perfume, ghosted across my neck. The air around the cart dropped several degrees, a sudden, sharp cold that clawed at my lungs. Then, from the darkness just beyond the locket, a whisper, ragged and dry as autumn leaves, slithered into my ear. It wasn't a word, but a sound. A familiar, childish giggle. And the broken doll's head, its porcelain eyes painted wide and blue, slowly, impossibly, turned towards me. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I just dropped the flashlight, the wrench clattering against the tile, and ran. I ran like hell, not caring where I was going, just away. Away from the locket, away from the whisper, away from the doll. I burst out of the mall's main entrance, gasping for air, the metallic taste of fear raw in my mouth. I never went back. I never collected my pay. I never told anyone the full truth of what I saw, what I heard. They say Northwood Mall was finally demolished, reduced to rubble. Sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls just right, I swear I can still hear the faint, distant scrape-clack of a shopping cart, and a child's soft, knowing giggle, as if something out there is still looking for the perfect additions to its collection. And a part of me, the part that remains forever cold, wonders if it's still looking for me.